Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on.
What is social dependency? It's an individual's need to be surrounded by others in order to feel more at ease. Humans have a history of being socially dependent beings. A few obvious reasons for that are reproduction and raising our young, since typically our young cannot fend for themselves until they are several years old. So then why has the net of social dependency grown? Why are we dependent on one another beyond just mating and raising our young until they are self-sufficient? Some early signs of our social dependency arose 1.8 to 1.5 million years ago with our ancestors, the Homo erectus, the first true hunter-gatherers in our ancestry. Evidence has shown that they migrated in large groups out of Africa, thus working together as social beings helped optimize their survival and later evolution into the humans that we are today. Some further insight into the innate aspect of our social dependency comes from the Zhu Hosani Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, the oldest indigenous population on Earth. At the time of the fieldwork performed by Polly Weisner, they still lived as mobile hunters and gatherers belonging to the most vulnerable human groups on Earth. Both the men and women carry mitochondrial DNA characteristic of the deepest roots of the African phylogenetic tree from which all modern humans descend. This refers to our human mitochondrial DNA, which is believed to have come from one woman, Eve, who most likely lived in Africa about 170,000 years ago. Due to their close genetic link to the mitochondrial Eve, their lifestyle could provide some insight to how our evolutionary ancestors depended on each other for survival. The Zhuhasani strongly believed that kinship led to optimum success, saying, "Kinship ties, together with terminologies and relationships based on exchange of goods and services that are used to reify them, increase the number of people that one could call upon, share with, count on to reciprocate, go to live with when in need, and elicit help from rearing one's young." Thus, they believed that those without strong family support were less likely to survive. Our early ancestors, such as the Homo erectus, probably found the same to be true, which is why they migrated in large groups together through Africa millions of years ago. Although we are still social beings in ways similar to our ancestors, today's society has other terms that are generally linked to dependency on others, such as being an introvert versus an extrovert. After a quick Google definition search, we see that introverts are defined as shy and predominantly concerned with their own thoughts and feelings rather than external things. And extroverts are seen as outgoing, expressive, and predominantly concerned with external things. Now, this reminds me of the implicit association test, and all the positive words are always linked with extroverts. In an article by Jonathan Roch, he discusses how extroverts dominate public and social life, setting the expectations and the social norm, and that since outgoing is considered normal, it is more desirable to be an extrovert in today's society. This creates a bias against those described as introverts, who are generally associated with more negative terms such as guarded, loner, and private, and as Jonathan stated, suggests smallness of personality. Clearly, the extroverts seem to have the advantage over introverts when comparing these common descriptions of the two personalities. But what might be some neurobiological reasons behind these differences in social dependency, and social dependency in general?
Now, the neuroscience behind our social dependency is best explained when examining neuroanatomical studies. But before we can go on to any studies, we must first set a clear classification for our social dependency. For our purposes, those who are dependent on others are considered to be extroverts, whereas those independent of others can be seen more as introverts. Thus, using regional cerebral blood flow, we can examine if there's any actual neuroanatomical differences between the two types of individuals. As it turns out, there is. Introverts appear to have much higher temporal lobe blood flow in addition to increased functional connectivity between the cortex and limbic system, thus signifying a potential localization for one's social dependency or personality. Furthermore, the temporal lobe epilepsy and Culver-Boyce syndrome demonstrate how damage to the temporal lobe can result in drastic changes in personality, most commonly associated with the increase in extrovert-like behaviors. However, this brings up certain implications and issues, such as the oversimplification of our personalities, or the idea of introverts' increased connectivity arising from a lack of synaptic pruning similar to that of autism. Now on to the neuroscience behind social bonding. As you remember from Professor Evans' lectures, the voles are the most researched and best example for explaining how and why we need to depend on others. Harsh environments led to this evolutionary need for neuropeptides and neuroreceptors such as oxytocin, vasopressin, and dopamine in order to help build strong relationships with our partners and offspring in order to survive. Researchers believe that social bonding is believed to follow the systemic pathway. First, we must undergo social recognition, where areas of the cortex, more specifically the anterior cingulate cortex, relays information with the fusiform area in order to recognize, discriminate, and either reject or accept individuals depending if they're friend or foe. This then leads to the reward and motivation portion of the pathway. Once we perceive someone as friendly, areas involved in the reward circuit lead to increased activity, causing us to have more motivation and high reward when we interact with those individuals. Lastly, once you realize someone as your friend, your amygdala activity will dramatically decrease, resulting in decreased anxiety and fear for that person, thus allowing for proper social interactions to take place. Ultimately, the role of neuropeptides in social dependency can be further understood by focusing on mothers as they experience elevated levels of oxytocin and vasopressin during and after birth, which can possibly explain why mothers believed to possess maternal instincts or suffer from postpartum depression. In order to best understand the mechanism behind social dependency, you must also understand and study what happens in a damaged system. It's for that very reason that we begin to discuss autism. Autism is a neurological disorder characterized by repetitive compulsive behaviors, difficulty socializing, and impaired communication skills, which all arise from undersynaptic pruning, a faulty regulation of internal opioid production, and socialization-induced hyperactivity of the amygdala. Furthermore, autism has been shown to share the same behavioral and biological markers seen in solitary animals. One example of solitary animals demonstrating autistic-like behaviors is the montane voles. Recall that the prairie voles are monogamous, biparental, social creatures, whereas their cousins, the montane voles, are not. Studies have shown that their lack of sociability actually originates from a similar faulty internal opioid regulation center, creating a huge deficit in levels of oxytocin and vasopressin. Montane voles demonstrated an increase in social dependency in the form of mate preference after injections of intravasopressin, thus alluding to this idea that social cells, or social hormones, being responsible for one's sociability. Another experiment separated highly social dependent newborn rhesus monkeys away from their families in order to see if a life as solitary would alter their neuroanatomy in any shape, way, or form. Surprisingly, research discovered that the separated monkeys developed autistic-like behaviors, in addition to drastically decreased oxytocin levels similar to that of individuals with autism. This reiterates the idea of social hormones or social cells being crucial for social dependency. Lastly, based off of the previous study, research wanted to know if autistic behaviors could be reversed. By injecting oxytocin into autistic individuals, they believed that by restoring their depleted oxytocin levels, that it should also restore their innate social behaviors. As it turned out, it did. Subjects reported to have less social anxieties and fears associated with more increased eye gaze and much more communication. This led to the idea of oxytocin possibly being regulatory of the amygdala's hyperactivity during social interactions in order to decrease one's social anxiety and fears.
So we are naturally social beings, but why? How do we interpret these findings? What role does social dependency play in our lives, and how does it affect our decision making? Social dependency can be viewed from many different perspectives. One is individualism and collectivism. This world map shows the degree to which a country is collectivistic or individualistic, with dark purple being individualistic and white being collectivistic. North America, Europe, and Australia are the most individualistic, while the rest of the world tends to be neutral, with several exceptions like some countries in Africa. Individualism is a concept where a person views the self as a separate being. There's a high emphasis on independency and autonomy,
confidence, assertiveness, and individual expressions are valued. It's also more conducive to extroversion, and sometimes at others' expense. They make choices that benefits themselves. Collectivism is the concept where someone bases their identity on interpersonal relations like family or work. They want to maintain interpersonal harmony and respect. Obedience, loyalty, and meekness are some of the characteristics valued, and it's more conducive to introversion. They'll make choices that tends to benefit the community. Overall, there is higher loneliness in collectivistic societies compared to individualistic societies due to strained interpersonal relationships and poor social skills. But the type of stressors are different. For individualistic people, it's a lack of interactions with their friends and other relationships that predicted higher loneliness. For collectivistic societies, these people valued family. Individualistic and collectivistic individuals respond differently when their social status is threatened. For individualistic people, they tend to become defensive, aggressive, and antisocial. For collectivistic people, they become quiet, detached, and withdrawn in response to social exclusion. For individualistic people, their goal is to prioritize the self and preserve their self-image, while collectivistic people withdraw from social situations to prevent any other damage to relationships. What are the implications? There are many types of social dependency, and the degree to which we value others is different. There's also the concept of the individual versus being a member of the community. Individualistic people tend to make decisions that further their agenda the most. Collectivistic people tend to make decisions that benefit the group and are more salient about their close ones. There's also the translation of mental health treatments across cultures. We need to be wary of such. That concludes the end of our video. Hope you enjoyed it.